They say the truest things are said in jest. Here's an old joke with an important insight. There once was a father with twin sons, each quite different. One was such a sad sack that he could crush Mary Poppins' buoyant song. Even on the sunniest days, he would look to the looming storm. The other son was the complete opposite, as siblings often are. The glass was not only half full, it was overflowing onto the table. Every summer rain meant that flowers were watered, the bees were busy, and the world became more beautiful. The father worried about both sons, as parents are wont to do. He longed to find a way to help his side-eyed son see the abundant good in life, and for his sweetness and light son to learn that real life requires a tougher skin. And so the father came up with a clever solution. He filled one room in the house with the best toys and gadgets he could find. His pessimist would be blown away by the bounty, melting even his hardest heart. For his other son, he ordered a huge hulking pile of horse manure to be dumped in the backyard. It was just what his Pollyanna needed to get a true taste of life's hard knocks. The next morning, the father led the boys to their instructive gifts. After leaving them for an hour, he excitedly opened the door to his first son's room bearing the latest toys. Hoping he would see his son's frown turned upside down, instead, he saw the boy sitting sullenly in the corner. All the toys and gadgets were strewn across the floor. "What's wrong?" the father implored. "Aren't these your favorite toys?" The son glanced up with tear-reddened eyes and said, "Dad, these all look good, but they'll soon break, and I'll have less than I had before. I'll be bored and sad, so why bother?" Strike one, the father thought. But perhaps he would succeed with his idealist. As he turned the corner into the backyard, the father couldn't believe his eyes. Clumps of manure were hurling through the air. The father cried out, Son, what's going on? Are you okay? Where are you?" A head popped up from the back of the pile. The boy was literally wearing manure and grinning ear to ear. "Hi, Dad." Son, what are you doing?" The boy replied, "Dad, look at this mountain of manure. There's got to be a pony in here somewhere." It's a familiar but potent lesson, especially in these days when we constantly scan for silver linings amongst the dark skies of our times. There is a little bit of each son within us all, as we can feel smothered by the trials we face, and yet still see the good that comes from rising to meet the challenge, perhaps even discovering something remarkable in ourselves. It's certainly easy to give in to the darkness, to lament the dangers, uncertainties, and fears that mark our lives. But we are equally capable of rising above the muck and mire, basking in a new appreciation for the blessings we've taken for granted in simpler, easier days. This ability to turn sour citrus into a cooling summer beverage is described as both hope and optimism. Often seen as synonyms, when examined more closely, there are nuances of difference. The British scholar Rabbi Jonathan Sacks sees optimism as, quote, "the belief that the world is changing for the better," while, quote, "hope is the belief that together we can make the world better." In essence, optimism is a passive longing, while hope inspires us to action. For Sacks, our history as Jews makes us skeptical of optimism, yet full of a faith that refuses to allow us to give up hope. Columnist Nicholas Kristof, who is committed to regularly sharing good news amidst the bleeding leads that fill our papers, glimpses a promising path through our collective pain. He sees the depths of our struggles as the faltering foundation of dramatic, positive, and necessary change, reminding us, quote, we may be so desperate, our failures so manifest, our grief so raw, that the United States can once more, as during the Great Depression, embrace long-needed changes that would have been impossible in cheerier times. Christoph especially takes comfort in the attitudes and inspired action of young people, which have historically been the dynamic engine for lasting change. New Jersey's famous son, no, not that one, the other one, Senator Cory Booker, expands this even further, adding that, quote, "Hope is the act of conviction that despair will never have the last word. Real hope is bloodied, is battered, is bruised. Real hope has to be calloused over and scarred because hope is daring. Hope takes risks." Booker's take brings to mind Hemingway's wisdom that, quote, "The world breaks everyone, and afterward many are strong at the broken places." Though Papa was definitely not Jewish, too much hunting and drinking, often at the same time, this is a bit of wisdom that feels rabbinic, in that our people have been forged in the fires of a tragic history to become its most enduring tribe. Indeed, our people are compared in the Talmud to olives, which exude their best essence when pressed into oil. So perhaps the key to the miracle of our survival is this uncanny ability to turn duress into devotion, the slings and arrows of bigotry into the plowshares and pruning hooks of a better tomorrow. Another Talmudic source offers a stirring story, recounting when the sages climbed Jerusalem's Mount Scopus to survey the ruins of the destroyed temple. Their grief at seeing the wreckage of the house of God was deepened as a fox ran out from the site of the Holy of Holies, which had once bore the Ark of the Covenant. Most of the rabbis wept, but only the great Rabbi Akiva laughed. His colleagues were aghast and confronted him on this strange reaction. Akiva explained that two closely linked prophecies provided insight into both Jewish history and the broader human condition. One passage prophesied the destruction of the first temple, even down to roaming foxes, while the other prophesied the people's return and rebuilding of the sanctuary. For Akiva, the prophecy of gloom and destruction was vital for the fulfillment of the rebuilding. Akiva applied these readings to the tragic sight before their eyes, promising that the desperate times they faced were a necessary prelude to an ultimate redemption of the land and our people. Akiva's words are said to have comforted his colleagues, and as we know, the second prophecy did eventually come to fruition. For as the prophet Zechariah foretold, there shall yet be elderly men and elderly women sitting in the streets of Jerusalem, and the streets of the city shall be full of boys and girls playing. The commentators I've shared with you see, even in the many and daunting crises of our time, not merely an opportunity to don the cloak of hope, but a fertile foundation upon which to rebuild our beleaguered world. It is a significant challenge, evoking a sacred commitment to improve and enrich beyond what existed before, to inspire and enlighten us to more fully align our values with God's vision and the works of our hands with the will of our Creator. With all of these trials and struggles that we currently face, it's easy to feel that these are uniquely overwhelming times. But think about our own family histories, the forces arrayed against our parents and grandparents. In their vision and fortitude, we find powerful models of faith and hope for the future, models that inspire a resilience of spirit and a drive to rise above even the starkest of circumstances. My grandfather Joe was an immigrant, and my other three grandparents were the children of those who fled the persecutions of the old world to find possibility on these shores. Both sets of grandparents met and married in the midst of the Great Depression, brought children into a broken world on the eve of Europe's terrors, and built lives when all seemed lost. My grandfather sought work where he could, even scavenging dumps from Colorado mines for remnants of worth. During the war, one set of grandparents worked in a B-29 bomber factory as they scraped and sacrificed amidst wartime austerity. And yet, despite global economic catastrophe and a world war in which the fate of humanity, particularly for Jews, was uncertain in the face of Hitler's power and poison, my grandparents embraced the promise of something better. They shouted a clear and strong yes to life and living, knowing that in their resistance to the darkness, there lied the precious spark that could kindle the light. And out of the ashes of a charred decade, they forged a future for me and for my children. Naftali Imber was a Jewish poet and activist. When Zionism was merely the dream of a handful of European idealists, and our 2,000-year exile from the Promised Land seemed a permanent state of being, Imber penned the famous words that have become the national anthem of the Jewish state. They can easily be broadened to encompass Hatikvah, the hope of not only the Jewish people, but of all humanity. For even in the most menacing of moments, we persist, recommitting ourselves to seek and to strive, to struggle and to build, to overcome and to attain a brighter, better, and more blessed future. Kol od balevav, as long as the Jewish spirit yearns deep in the heart, with eyes turned east, looking towards Zion, our hope is not yet lost. The hope of 2 millennia to be a free people in our land, the land of Zion and Jerusalem. May the indomitable human spirit, yearning deep within our hearts, turn its eyes toward a world healed of illness, a world made more equal in opportunity and circumstance, a world rising above racism, bigotry, and hate, a world nurturing a hope that is not yet lost, for it is a hope that has endured and sustained us, a hope that is our promise and our patrimony, our source and our salvation, our path forward and our beckoning destiny. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will, and let us say, Amen.